A Roman legionary earns 225 denarii a year. That sounds like a lot, until you realize the army charges him for his own food, his own boots, his own tent, even his own funeral. By the time the deductions hit, a soldier who should be wealthy is walking home with less than a common laborer. And here's where it gets interesting. Those soldiers gambling for Jesus' clothes at the crucifixion, they weren't being cruel. They were fighting over something worth 3 months of their salary. You've heard the story your whole life, but you've never done the math. Let's start with a number nobody talks about. 225 denarii. That's the annual salary of a Roman legionary under Emperor Augustus. We know this because the historian Tacitus recorded it in his annals, written around 116 AD. He specifically mentions the pay raise that Augustus gave to the legions, and the number is confirmed by papyrus records from Roman Egypt. Now, a denarius was a silver coin, about the size of a modern dime. But here's what that actually bought. 1 denarius was the standard daily wage for a skilled laborer, a carpenter, a mason, a blacksmith. So the soldier's annual salary equaled 225 days of skilled labor. Sounds good, right? 225 days of pay, but the soldier didn't get to keep it. The Roman military had a system. They deducted costs directly from the soldier's pay before he ever touched the money. We know the exact amounts because of a document called the Vindolanda tablets. These are wooden writing tablets excavated from a Roman fort in northern England. They date to around 90 to 120 AD, and they contain actual pay records. One tablet records the pay of a cavalry soldier named Masculus. He writes to his commanding officer asking for more beer for his unit. But the real gold is in the accounting records. They show exactly what came out of a soldier's paycheck. First deduction: food. The army charged 20 denarii a year for grain rations. That's about 2 months of the soldier's salary. Second, boots and clothing, another 20 denarii. Third, tent and equipment maintenance, 10 denarii. Fourth, a mandatory savings fund for burial expenses, 10 denarii. Add it up, 60 denarii gone before the soldier ever saw a coin. That leaves 165 denarii. But we're not done. The deductions didn't stop there. The army also charged for hay for the horses if the soldier was cavalry, for weapons repairs, for the annual celebration of the emperor's birthday, for the standard issue military belt, which was surprisingly expensive. A historian named Richard Alston analysed these records in his book Soldier and Society in Roman Egypt, published in 1995. He calculated that after all mandatory deductions, a legionary took home roughly 120 denarii per year. That's about 10 denarii per month, 10 silver coins. Now, let's make this real. What could 10 denarii buy in the 1st century? In the city of Pompeii, preserved by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, archaeologists found graffiti listing prices. A loaf of bread cost about 2 asses. There were 16 asses in a denarius. So 1 denarius bought 8 loaves of bread. That means a soldier's monthly pay bought 80 loaves of bread. 80 loaves sounds like a lot, but a Roman soldier needed about 3 loaves per day to maintain his caloric intake. That's 90 loaves per month. The soldier was already short. And bread isn't the only thing. A litre of cheap wine cost about 1 as. A litre of olive oil, which was essential for cooking and lighting, cost about 3 asses. A pound of pork cost about 4 asses. A simple wool tunic cost about 15 denarii. That's a month and a half of the soldier's disposable income. Here's where the math gets brutal. A common labourer in Rome earned about 1 denarius per day. But he didn't have deductions. He kept every coin. So a labourer working 250 days per year took home 250 denarii. A soldier, after deductions, took home 120. The soldier who risked his life, who marched 20 miles a day in full armour, who stood on the frontier of the empire, earned less than half of a day labourer. But there was one thing that changed everything: the bonus. The Roman army didn't pay well during service, but it paid enormously at the end. Under Augustus, a legionary who completed his 25 years of service received a retirement bonus of 3,000 denarii. That's the equivalent of 13 years of his net pay, all at once. But here's the catch: most soldiers didn't live to collect it. The average life expectancy of a legionary during active service was about 40 years old. Many died in battle. More died from disease: dysentery, malaria, infections from minor wounds that turned septic. The Roman medical writer Celsus describes soldiers dying from gangrene after simple cuts. The retirement bonus was also paid in land, not cash. The soldier received a plot of farmland in a Roman colony, usually in a conquered province. This land was often far from where the soldier had served, far from any family he might have started, far from everything he knew. The historian Peter Garnsey studied these land grants in his work on the Roman economy. He found that the quality of the land varied enormously. Some veterans received fertile valley soil, others got rocky hillsides that barely supported goats. There was no guarantee. But here's what nobody tells you: the soldier could sell his land grant for cash to someone who wanted to settle in the provinces. This created a market where veterans could liquidate their retirement bonus and take the money elsewhere. How much did a land grant sell for? The records are fragmentary, but the historian Duncan Jones estimated that a standard allotment of about 50 acres could fetch between 1,000 and 2,000 denarii on the open market, less than the official 3,000, but still a fortune. So the soldier's real compensation was a poverty wage for 25 years, followed by a lump sum that could set him up for life, if he lived. And this brings us back to the crucifixion. The Gospel of John, chapter 19, verses 23 and 24. The soldiers crucify Jesus. Then they take his clothes and divide them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. But the tunic is seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they say, "Let's not tear it. Let's cast lots for it." You've heard this story. You've probably been told it shows the soldiers' cruelty, their indifference to the man dying next to them,
The dice are cast.
their greed. But now you know what those soldiers earned: 10 denarii per month. After deductions, a seamless linen tunic of good quality cost between 30 and 50 denarii in the 1st century. We know this from price edicts and from archaeological finds of textiles in the Judean desert. The historian John P. Meyer examined this in his work A Marginal Jew. He concluded that the tunic was likely worth 3 to 5 months of a soldier's pay. Those soldiers weren't being greedy for sport. They were fighting over an item worth half their annual disposable income. And here's the detail that changes everything. The Gospel of John specifies that the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece. This was a luxury item. Most tunics were made from 2 pieces of fabric sewn together at the shoulders and sides. A seamless tunic required a larger loom and more skill. It was the ancient equivalent of a designer garment. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, describes the high priest's robe as seamless. It was a symbol of status and purity. So when Jesus wore a seamless tunic, it wasn't just clothing, it was a statement.
First, the kingdom of God.
The soldiers recognized its value. They gambled for it. And the winner walked away with something worth more than his entire year of savings. Now, let's go deeper. What did that tunic actually cost to make? A skilled weaver working on a vertical loom could produce about 1 square meter of fabric per day.
The forest is cold.
A seamless tunic required about 3 square meters.
You must weave with
That's
purpose,
3 days of
for
labor.
Winter is coming.
The raw linen thread cost about 2 denarii. So the production cost was maybe 5 denarii.
No one is
The markup was 600 to 1,000%. Because the tunic wasn't just fabric, it was a status symbol. And the soldiers knew it. This is the world of the Roman soldier. A world where a single piece of clothing could be worth more than everything you owned. A world where you risked death every day for less than a labourer's wage. A world where your only hope was to survive 25 years and pray the land they gave you wasn't rocks. But there's one more layer to this story. The soldiers' pay wasn't just about money, it was about status. In Roman society, soldiers were legally forbidden from marrying during their service. This law was enacted by Augustus himself. The reasoning was simple. A soldier with a wife and children would be less willing to die. He would hesitate. He would think about home instead of the enemy. But soldiers did marry. They formed relationships with local women in the provinces. They had children. These relationships had no legal standing. The children were illegitimate. The woman had no rights to the soldier's pension if he died. We know this from the Vindolanda tablets again. Letters between soldiers and their partners. One letter, written by a woman named Sulpicia Lepidina, invites a friend to her birthday party. Another, from a soldier named Octavius, mentions sending money to his wife. The word wife is used, but legally she wasn't. The historian Mary Beard discusses these letters in her book Pompeii. She notes that the army knew about these relationships. They tolerated them, but they never recognized them. When a soldier died, his partner and children received nothing. The burial fund went to the army. The land grant went back to the state. This is the hidden cost of being a Roman soldier. You gave up your legal right to a family. You gave up your youth. You gave up your health. And in exchange, you got 10 denarii a month and a promise of land that might kill you before you ever saw it. So why did they do it? Why did men volunteer for this life? Because Roman citizenship was the prize. Soldiers who completed their service received Roman citizenship for themselves and their children. This was enormous. Citizenship meant legal protection. It meant the right to vote. It meant access to Roman courts. It meant your children could hold public office. For a man born in the provinces, this was a transformation. His children would be Romans. His grandchildren could become senators. The poverty wage was the price of entry into the most powerful identity in the ancient world.
Hunger returns to us.
And that's the irony.
Take more.
The soldiers who gambled for Jesus' clothes were probably auxiliaries, provincial men serving in the Roman army.
There is no one left.
They weren't Roman citizens yet.
Help us.
They were still earning that status. And here they were, standing at the foot of a cross, gambling for a tunic worth more than they'd save in a year, while the man on the cross was about to give them something they couldn't buy.
18.
The Roman soldier's salary, 225 denarii a year. After deductions, 120. After expenses, maybe 30 or 40 saved. After 25 years, a land grant that might be rocks or might be gold.
By sunset.
And those soldiers at the crucifixion, they didn't know they were standing at the center of history.
Over now?
They were just trying to get through the day,
Things and go.
trying to earn their citizenship, trying to win a tunic that would keep them warm next winter. Next time, we're going to look at something even more surprising. What did the Roman soldiers who guarded Jesus' tomb actually do for the next 3 days? And what happened to them when the tomb was found empty? The historical records give us an answer that most people have never heard. The soldiers at the crucifixion got a tunic worth 50 denarii. The soldiers at the tomb got something very different.